Alright guys, welcome to episode 5 of The Music World According to the Finschise. I'd like to start off today by talking about a classic album that people seem to forget about.
I'm in a rock and roll band, riding a Studs big head Jim, you know.
Now the Velvet Underground, I'm sure everybody's probably heard of at one point in their life or another. Their debut album, The Velvet Underground and Nico, is probably one of the most notorious rock albums of all time, but at the same time it's probably one of the most iconic rock albums of all time. This album here, Loaded, is one of their later albums, and it's one of the ones that they did without Andy Warhol producing it, but I would say that it's definitely different. It's definitely different than their earlier stuff. Their earlier stuff, I'm going to give you guys this. You know, a lot of people don't care for their early material because, I'm going to be straight up honest with you here, it's pretty freaking weird, and it's pretty weird in certain areas. You know, it's definitely psychedelic, and there's a lot of, like, imagery, and a lot of it's just strange imagery, and a lot of drugs, a lot of sex, and a lot of people don't care for that. However, here on Loaded, it's nothing psychedelic, really. I mean, there are like 2 songs that are kind of reminiscent of their earlier material, but for the most part, the Velvet Underground here focused on just making a straight-up, nothing fancy, rock and roll, bluesy record. You know, Sweet Jane is a great song. You know, there are a lot of great songs on here, you know. If you didn't like that first album, then you maybe want to try to give this one a shot. It's so different.
No, if you feel it, what I'm feeling, come on. All you soul-searching people, come on. Oh.
Alright guys, so for this week's first new release category, I'm going to be talking about a newer release by a band called Delta Spirit. Now, I'd heard a lot of good things about this band for quite some time, and I've been meaning to check them out, and I just got the chance recently to check them out. This album, Ode to Sunshine, it actually came out maybe a year or 2 ago. Listening to like the first 2 tracks on the album, I literally thought it was just another indie rock album, but then like 3 or 4 tracks into it, I realized that the band just did a couple of little things, like such as like that ragtime sounding piano, and just, they had like this, like, I don't know if you would call it country, but it was very heartfelt, and it kind of had a country feel to it in parts, but overall it just had a really cool, different indie rock sound to it. So if you're a fan of conventional, smooth, kind of breezy indie rock, well then this would be something that you should check out, definitely. It's a little different, but it's definitely interesting. Alright guys, so here, as you know, on the Music World According to the Finschise, I like to every once in a while just talk about an album that means that's very dear to my heart. Now, I'm going to talk today about the newest release from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. It's called It's Blitz. Now, the first 2 Yeah Yeah Yeahs albums, I'm going to be straight up with you guys, they're messy in some parts, especially their debut album, Fever to Tell. You know, some parts are like definitely worth the critical acclaim that they both albums got, but they are definitely messy, and you can tell throughout the albums that the band is searching for their sound. And on their 3rd release, It's Blitz, I would say that they definitely found that sound. They definitely have like a little bit of a 9 Inch Nails thing going on, you know. They added a little bit of dance in, but they're still straight to their rock roots. But it's definitely worth a listen. It's definitely cool. It's got a lot of electronica and dance, but at the same time there are some tracks. I'd say like good half of the album is dance tracks. You know, there's Dragon Queen and Heads Will Roll, and there are others. But and then there's also some straight up rock songs like Dull Life, and I would say that they've definitely found their signature sound on this album. So check it out, guys. Okay guys, for today's showdown, I'm going to be talking about 2 classic albums by Frank Zappa, and I'm talking old school Frank Zappa from the 60s.
It don't matter to me, 'cause I'm through with
with you. I went out and
Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about Freak Out. Freak Out is probably one of the first albums I really got into by Frank Zappa. I'm a huge fan of both albums, but Freak Out musically is better. Musically, you know, the people working for him, the people in his band, the Mothers of Invention, I thought that they were at their musical peak on this album, you know, and at the same time, I'd say it's a good start-off album for a lot of people because it's not as weird as his other releases. It's not as strange. You know, there are definitely some psychedelic elements in the last, like, 15 minutes of the album. But for the most part, the album is pretty much a satire of pop rock groups and, like, the Beatles, the Four Seasons, the Beach Boys, you know. It's a parody and a satire, so that's what I have to say about Freak Out.
Hey Tom, where you going with that flower in your hand? Hey Pop, where you going with that flower in your hand?
Alright, so, We're Only In It For The Money came out about 2 years later, and it has a little bit of a backstory to it. I say that because it's actually a track-by-track satire and spoof of the Beatles' classic album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Frank did this because there was a little bit of controversy. People were saying that Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was the first ever concept album. The truth is, Frank had already released 2, but the critics didn't want to look at them because they were strange and weird, and they only had a cult following and not a critical acclaim. Whatever, though, really. But We're Only In It For The Money, to me, lyrically, is one of the most important albums to me. It's, I think, one of the best satires ever made, not just in music, I'm talking about in general. It's just such a brilliant satire. Frank went down a list of just things that really got him angry about the world, between, you know, lazy parents and hippies, and just went down the list and wrote a song about every one of them, and really just took on all comers as far as that album. So lyrically, I'd say We're Only In It For The Money is a better album. Okay, so this is a really tough showdown for me. I'm a huge fan of both albums, but honestly, I think We're Only In It For The Money is the better album, but Freak Out is much more listener-friendly. So I would say that in the winner of this showdown is We're Only In It For The Money. However, you won't understand the album or its messages unless you listen to Freak Out first. So I would say that.
The velocity and love.
Okay, and we're going to finish up today with one of the better punk releases as far as I'm concerned in the last 10 years. It's by a band called the World Inferno Friendship Society, and ever since I've listened to this album here, Red Eyed Soul, I've been raving about it. You know, there's like 15 tracks on the album, but 12 or 13 of the tracks are constantly on my playlists, constantly going on my CD player. You know, it's a great album. You know, it's, for one thing, it's just so much fun, and there's so much, for me, there's so much imagery. You know, the band is classified as a circus punk band, and at first you might say, what the hell does that mean? But there's just this great feeling of just the circus throughout their songs, between the huge horn section and the great keyboard parts and the bells, and it's just such a vivid, such a lot. There's so much going on in the music. At the same time, it's just so freaking fun to listen to. So, and at the same time, it still stays true to its punk roots, with like slight, I wouldn't say a major theme, but I'd say a slight theme of anarchy throughout. So punk fans, you know, will enjoy it as well. So definitely worth checking out, guys. Absolutely. Alright, that's it for this episode, guys. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to my channel, stay tuned for my new show coming on Wednesday.